and welcome to Reasons Why Aliens Will Never Invade Earth podcast. I'm your host, Stanley Roberts, and, we've been talking back and forth to different groups and different people, but I have a very important guest today, Alameda County Sheriff, the actual sheriff, Gregory Ahern, and he's going to talk to us about some of the stuff going on in the Bay Area, Alameda County to be specific. And interesting about Gregory is that he was actually born and raised in Alameda County. So this is all he knows. Well, he knows more than that, but I'm saying that's all he knows is he's committed to his area and his neighborhood. And he's been doing it for years. I want to talk to him. He went to school in Hayward. He went to St. Mary's College. And we're going to have him live here now. We're going to chit-chat about some of the things, including one of the important things. But let's bring him on first, and then we will start the conversation. Hello, sir. How are you?
Stanley Roberts and group. Hello. How are you? Doing great.
Well, first of all, thank you for joining us because, you have a very busy schedule, and there's been a lot going on in Alameda County, including the what I call the 24 hours of mayhem over July 4th weekend. But I also want to talk to you about, some of the other issues that's been going on. And one of the things is I'm trying to make sure we're both here. There we are. Is the rise in violence in Alameda County is one subject. And also I'm going to talk to you about defunding the police. And the latest thing, you guys had an ambush of some deputies, and one of them is in the hospital right now. And a couple other things I want to talk about. But first of all, let's talk about the rise of violence in Alameda County, because if you're on the outside looking in, and me being out here in Phoenix, I'm looking at it going, whoa, what is going on there? What is happening?
Well, you're exactly right. There has been a number of increased shootings in Alameda County, and specifically in the city of Oakland. It appears there's some type of turf wars and battle over control over the narcotics that's going on in the area. So combined with the access to firearms and extended magazines, we're seeing a lot more violent crime and a lot more shootings in our area.
So I guess it seems to be it's gotten worse over the last few months, if not the last couple of years. And it's kind of reached a point now, he's like, how do we put the cat back in the bag? Sorry for that use of words, but how do we fix what appears to be broken right now?
Well, when I talk to community groups and talk to the media, such as yourself, I try to explain to them that you have to maintain your neighborhoods, because once you give up your neighborhoods to violent crime and to the criminals, it is nearly impossible to regain control, because they take control of the streets, of the corners, and have people live in fear on those blocks. So our main objective is to enforce the laws and do a lot of enforcement in regards to violent crime, but also work with prevention. Prevent these things from happening in the first place. And the way we prevent them is by having programs and services in those areas for the people prior to them entering into that gang world, that violent crime world.
So I've noticed that, you guys, I watched your Twitter account, I watched your Facebook, and they're pretty much, they go together almost with the amount of content. But you guys have been recovering a lot of illegal weapons with extended magazines, which are obviously not allowed. And it's interesting, and it brings up a point that some people made, is that the bad guys still continue to get weapons. And even though we try to limit the amount of weapons out there, the bad guys always seem to come up with weapons. And weapons that they have are like, I've seen barrel guns with, I don't know if they call them that, but they have they carry 100 rounds. I've seen banana clips on guns, handguns. What is going on? I know they're out there, but how are they getting these things?
So you're living right now in Arizona, if I'm correct. And
yes,
Arizona and Nevada have easier access to those type of magazines. And just like people are willing to purchase illegal narcotics and street drugs, they have the connections to get into those worlds. They also have the connections to get into firearms and magazines. There's also people that now can manufacture their own self-made weapons. We call them ghost guns. They use 3D printers and just simply purchase the lower receiver of the firearm, and then they can have the other parts shipped to them from China, from Russia, and they put together their own weapon. So there's a They have false sales. So people will send people that are legally eligible to purchase firearms. They'll send them to outside areas. They'll make the purchase. They call them straw purchases, and then they bring them back and provide them to the gang members.
Okay, so that brings up the next question, which was brought to me a few times before. And the next question is, some people are saying that you, the sheriff, are denying people gun permits in Alameda County. But I've read on your website, and it says that you have the right to issue it to whoever you want to. So what would prevent someone from being issued a firearm legally and carrying it as a concealed weapon in Alameda County?
Well, first of all, I don't prevent anyone from getting a CCW. It's a process that we have. We have one extra step than do other counties. We're simply asked that people get a psychological test before they are issued a CCW, and that they have $1 million bond on hand in case they discharge their firearm illegally. And the $1 million bond is not difficult to acquire. You get $1 million insurance on your home, a private umbrella account, and many times we waive that if they're have a specific need for a firearm immediately. So the firearm CCWs are given out. We're up to about 300 in Alameda County. That's not very many compared to the rural counties that have several thousand, 5,000, 6,000. But the CCWs are eligible for people who have a need and a right to carry a firearm.
Okay, so basically, if they can pass the psychological and they can produce the insurance, which can be waived if they can prove that, hey, we have a reason, because some people say, I just want to carry a gun because I'm worried about my safety, but then they have nothing to prove that there's a safety issue, then that could mean, okay, we'll give it to you if you pass the psych, and we just need you to get the insurance, and then you're good to go. And then you have to check in every 2 years and requalify to shoot.
There's a requalification, and we have a process that all you have to do is go online and fill out the application, show a need for the firearm, and we process that application.
Okay, so now that we got past that point, I want to go back for a second. Ghost guns. So can ghost guns be stopped at all, or are we just pretty much at the mercy of people making these things?
Well, there is an argument on both sides. One, to people who want to be able to have the right to make their own firearm, self-made firearms, they have the right to do that, but have them register that firearm with our ATF or Department of Justice. They can register their firearm, just like you'd register your handgun. And the argument there is, well, if they're willing to buy an illegal ghost gun, then why are they going to go register that firearm? So they could register it, but the way you stop it is by the community helping us out, telling us, are there people in your area, your neighborhood, that are armed and prohibited from being in legal possession of those firearms? And then we do an investigation and do our best to recover that firearm and their weapons, along with their extended magazines and ammunition. We have a group that goes out specifically for armed and prohibited persons.
So I guess your roadblock would be the quote unquote snitch factor, because people think that if they report someone in the neighborhood doing something like that, then they are snitching, which I find amazing, because if one of their relatives gets killed in a shooting, they want to tell everything they can. That's not snitching. But and I hate to use that word, I really do hate the word snitching, but that's the word they're using in the streets. It's funny how that word transcends time. It never changes, But if it's someone in the neighborhood, well, I don't want to be a snitch, but yet they want the violence to stop, but they don't want to participate in the process.
Right. And we have a crime tip line where you can leave anonymous information. And if we can validate your information, we then work up a case on the individual in possession of those weapons. And you're exactly right. People care after somebody that they love gets shot and killed. and we're trying to make people care before that violent crime ever occurs.
So let's move on for a second, if you don't mind. I want to see what, a lot of police agencies now are losing officers. They're losing monies. I think LAPD lost for the first 1 year, $145 million in funding. And then I think the sheriff there said that they expect $145 million for the next year. And then there are people that says, well, that money needs to go other places. But in actuality, and then they wonder why the crime is starting to go up. Is there a coalition between defunding the police, as they call it, and the rise in crime?
We in law enforcement believe so. We believe that once you defund us, then reduce our access to do enforcement actions, the crime is going to go up in those areas. But the other part of that equation is that when you start defunding police stop doing the other types of things that they're required to do to make the community safe, like programs and services, like providing school resource officers to the various schools, responding to those type of calls, getting to calls for service in a rapid manner, assisting the fire guys when they need to have people evacuated from fires, providing medical aid to the people that are involved in car accidents. All those things, when you start reducing our numbers, and we're trained in first aid, we're trained in evacuations, we're trained in civil unrest. And when you reduce those numbers, you're going to have other problems that are attributed to the fact that there aren't police on the streets. So we try to focus again on prevention by having enough people out on the streets to dissuade people from committing a crime. Just like you slow down every time you see a CHP on the freeway behind you, everybody go, oh, let's slow down. If you see, they're not stopping you. They didn't do it. All you did was see them. So that's prevention just by being present. And then we want to have enforcement to take those criminals off the street that are doing the violent crime. But we also have to have programs and services for folks in the neighborhood so they have access to be successful. And if you defund us, the first things that we're going to have to do is take away the programs and service and only deal with enforcement.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because Police Athletic League was a program that funds it, and those things go away. People don't realize that for every action, there's a reaction. Also, remember, I think it was Citizens on Patrol. That's also, they're volunteers, but the money has to be done for the equipment, the vehicles, the gasoline, and all the other things are associated with, and it's called COPS, Citizens on Patrol. Those also go away. And also, remember, like things like pedestrian stings to help, stop pedestrian safety. If you're dealing with code 3 calls on a regular basis and you have no more funding, there's no way to do these other things that, and my segments have been to help minimize people getting hit by cars, car crashes, pedestrian deaths. And when you take away all that stuff, they don't realize that actually takes away from those things. And in some cases, I read in San Francisco, they want to just limit the amount of officers that they have altogether.
And that's exactly what is difficult for us. Right now we're trying to improve our reputation, become more professional, and we're trying to interact with groups. And if the only interaction we have is, we're doing enforcement, that's a negative interaction. And you're going to talk about that. Example, people getting a simple speeding ticket or going through a stop sign ticket. They talk about it for years, and it goes on and on instead of the one positive contact. Hey, I was out shooting baskets and a police officer came up and made some shots with me. We played catch. We threw the football back and forth. He helped me with my homework. Those are the type of things we need to do more of.
I agree with you 100%.
And if you take us away, all we do is enforcement.
Now, interesting point about this is that I remember the pivotal moment when law enforcement began the process of getting more weapons and armored vehicles. I was there. And if you do your research, I'm talking to people who are listening, I was actually listed in the crime scene log for the Los Angeles shootout, the LAPD shootout. The reason why is because I inadvertently ended up in the actual shooting scene. I was the only journalist that made it on the inside with the camera. And so I had to be logged in as part of the crime scene. And that was when they were shooting with the guys had on full body armor. They were shooting with guns with armor-piercing bullets that were fired and went 3 or 4 blocks. When LAPD showed up, all they had were handguns and shotguns. They had to actually go to a gun store and get better guns to try to combat these guys because they were not prepared for what took place. And you go, well, who cares about what happened back then? But history has a tendency to repeat itself. And which brings me to the 24 hours of mayhem that I mentioned earlier, because in Oakland, Alameda County, there was just total mayhem. It's all over social media. I don't want to reshare because I'm not trying to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. But they were donuts running into each other, cars on fire, brush fire starting, fireworks going off. And it was just pure and unadulterated mayhem. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was born in Oakland, over by 106th on the hillside there, and we used to watch those fireworks. They used to be like maybe a flare would shoot up in the air, or somebody'd light off a firecracker. Remember cherry bombs and
yes,
it has gone off the chart. Those were so many illegal fireworks that were firing up in the sky. There was a 37-second clip just showed the sky on fire from North Oakland to West Oakland. It was just unbelievable. And those are expensive fireworks. Those things cost about $200 every time you light them. I can't believe that amount of illegal fireworks is in one specific area. And it was all over. I know we got reports from all over the county, and our adjacent neighbors had the same problems, same issues. But it was very dangerous. You saw what happened in LA where the bomb truck blew up because they were transporting the fireworks.
I saw that.
And you see the dangers that it blew out city blocks of windows. And I think, a dozen people or so went to the hospital. These things are very dangerous. But 4th of July, every year, Americans believe they can get liquored up and blow things up in the air. And we try our best. We try to stop them early on, but it's very difficult.
When I worked with LAPD for the LAPD TV series, July 4th, New Year's Eve, we would park under an overpass because back then we were worried about projectiles coming down, bullets. But now we're worried about setting our whole neighborhood on fire because, these things are, and clearly the case of what happened and ironically, that was Newton Division. That was the division I worked in.
All right.
And that container is made to contain an explosion, and it blew that out. That gives you an idea how much firepower was inside that container at one time.
So I talked to our explosive ordnance disposal team. I said, how could that happen? And they said, you have to be they don't know. They are not part of the investigation. They just have an opinion. And their opinion is that maybe the fireworks weren't placed directly in the center of the container in the exact spot where they needed to be. And if it was offset a bit, either while transport or whatever, and it ignite, and you saw what happened. Huge explosion.
Yeah, because I saw my Twitter just blew up. It was like, have you seen this? And I go, whoa, and then I heard Newton Division. And I still have the mug here. It says Newton Division because it's rare, because it used to be called Shooting Newton. And like I said before, we would literally hide underneath our overpasses on those days because it would just rain bullets. So that area has just been crazy ever since. Yeah. And so now I want to talk to you about another thing, which was very serious. And we have an officer, one of the deputies in the hospital. You guys, April 17th, you guys were ambushed, if I have my dates right. And you just released a video on your Twitter, I believe, and your Facebook page. What is going on with that? Tell me about that and what's the officer's mind? What's going on right now with the officer's minds about being ambushed?
Right. Very, very serious. We were lucky. We're glad that we had training for our people, and they were able to respond to a man with a gun, screaming at the neighbors, telling the neighbors he's going to shoot and kill them if they came on outside. And so they called us. We responded. He hid from us and went to a front yard behind a fence and waited for our deputies to approach. He was lying down underneath a car, and for a second he let go of his weapon, and our guys came up and were able to confront him. and said, don't touch that weapon, stay away from that weapon, come out and surrender. They tried to de-escalate that subject, and he looked at them and said, tell my mom I love her, and reached for the weapon and fired off 3 rounds right through the fence. One of the rounds left stippling, which is the gunpowder fired out of the handgun at such a close range that it left gunshot residue stippling on our deputy's face. And so they returned fire, and they're probably striking him at the same time he was firing back. But for your listeners, some of the people that get shot don't automatically just stop shooting. Their heart still continues to go, and they still have some muscle functions that allow them to continue to fire their weapon. And so that's why our deputies continued to fire, ending that threat. But if you're able to watch the extended portion of that, as soon as they rendered that individual safe, they started rescue efforts to save his life. They went and rushed and got a tourniquet, put direct pressure on the wounds. And it's just really difficult to understand being in that type of critical situation and then immediately reverting back to trying to save the guy's life. Very dangerous, heroic efforts on our part. Tragic that it got to that point where we had to take decisive action against that individual who had a pretty long criminal history.
Now, I've had people say that, sometimes the officer shows up and it escalates the situation just by showing up. But you guys cannot just ignore a call of someone possibly being injured. And then there's a whole case of people saying, well, you should bring in a social worker. But situations are dynamic and they happen very quickly. And I've ridden with law enforcement, and I know how it can go from 0 to 60 in a point of a second. It goes from, hey, I like you, you're a nice guy, to, oh, I'm going to stab you, I'm going to shoot you, or whatever. And that's on the bad guy's part. And you guys, at the end of the day, it comes down to it, it's like, hey, you just want to go home at the end of the day. I get that. But what do you think? Do you think there's a way we can meet a happy medium? Or are we pretty much, it's up to everybody?
Great ideas to have social workers come out there. But with a man with a gun, that's not the time that we're going to have them out there. They could be shot and killed. They have no way to defend themselves. However, what we have been doing is working with these critical incident teams where they can respond to people who maybe have a mental health crisis or having behavioral health issues. And we'll work with the critical incident team and try to find the best way. We've really expanded over the last 5 years our de-escalation training, where it goes to your presence, your voice, your body language, your movements, all those type of things, trying to calm the people down. Because our people don't want to be involved in shootings. They're very traumatic events. We do just want to go home, but we want to make sure the people having those crises are taken care of and get the services that they need. And so, quite frankly, I think deputy sheriffs who work in the jail, who see mental health issues and de-escalate events each and every hour of the day, and having people having those crises not get to a physical altercation. Sometimes they do, but we're more times than not end up in a peaceful resolution. And we do that through de-escalation and through our training and the mannerisms. But we want to have the other people out there as well. We're not opposed to that. But I think they might be opposed to responding to people with guns without a law enforcement presence.
So the question came up, has policing become harder with the growing population of mental illness?
Yes, it has gone harder. We get criticized for our actions, but we are training. We are working on that. We've extended the amount of time we deal with these individuals. An example, last week we had a person going through a mental health crisis. He was down underneath an overpass. We spent 45 minutes with our critical incident team trying to de-escalate, trying to talk him down with a number of units on scene. In my era, we didn't have that time. We didn't have that luxury. We didn't have the availability of the training there. And so 45 minutes, we're able to get him to our John George Psychiatric Hospital without injury or harm to him or any of our staff.
Interesting. Okay. So now you guys, with all the training you have to do, now you've got to have to be trained on how to spot mental illness too.
Yeah, but that's been a long time part of our training. But what we haven't had and we've expanded and tried to get better at is the de-escalation. The taking a situation and calming the person down through your voice, through your mannerisms, letting them talk on a cell phone to somebody in his group, his parents, his family, his spouse, anybody that could hear just a common voice where they assure him nothing's going to happen to him.
So I've asked around about you before we had this meeting, before we set this up a month ago, and gotten praise about a lot of different people saying about how you've been handling things over the years, and they like what you're doing. And I've even talked to some deputies who actually, which is rare, that they actually say they like the guy in charge, which you know how hard that is. And so I applaud that. But aren't you running for re-election?
I am. I want to see things get better. So people talk about reform. I want the Alameda County Sheriff's Office to be the example that other agencies throughout the nation follow. And so you mentioned the sports leagues and police activities league. We've expanded that to now be over 2,000 of our residents involved in our soccer program alone. We've expanded into a boxing program to teach discipline, fitness, health, and mentorship through the boxing coach. We've gone through Dig Deep Farms to help people get jobs once they get out of jail, show them a path to employment, because crime isn't about race. Crime's about lack of opportunities. It's about unemployment. It's about undereducation. It's about health. It's about the environment where people live. It's about employment. And so we're trying in our area to address all those 5 major categories of getting people to continue on with school, getting people to continue on with their employment, getting people to work on their poverty level to increase the amount of poverty. And we're trying to get them to improve on their health, where we're giving them access to food. I think this month we've delivered over several thousand food items to members in our community that struggle with obtaining food to nourish their children and themselves. And we're trying to improve the environment by cleaning things up, by removing debris, by taking away the things that harm our environment, like the oil spills, the gasoline, the things that the homeless people and the encampments leave behind. That costs thousands and thousands of dollars, but it sends a bad message if you don't clean it up every time you see it. So every time we see it, we pass it on to Public Works and get it cleaned up so the people in the neighborhoods go, you know what? People are trying. Maybe I'll try as well.
Well, you know what? I do appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that you're actually trying to make your community better. You grew up in it. So you've been there. You've done that. You know what's going on. You have your finger on the pulse, it seems like. And as one person wrote, let me go back to the chat for a second. He says, yet you seem like a honest, caring official. He said, come work in San Francisco. You'd be the first to be honest and caring. I'm not trying to bash San Francisco, but I'm glad that you guys are trying to make an effort.
I only know Alameda County. I don't know how other people police in their areas. I rode my bike in those areas. I rode my motorcycle in those areas. I played a lot of sports in those areas. I lived in all parts of the county, still live in the county. I want to make this the best county that we can.
Well, I do thank you. I do thank you for taking time to talk to me, because this was important. And good luck on your re-election.
Well,
and if you, as long as you maintain that level of, our conversation to me was like, I felt like I would vote for you if I could vote in Alameda County, but I've never been. Always in San Mateo County.
I'll get you an address. I'll get you an address so you can vote in Alameda County.
No, because I'd fail the psych test and I wouldn't be able to get a concealed weapon. I'm kidding. So, Gregory Ahern, thank you very much. The Sheriff of Alameda County. thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can have this conversation again in the near future.
Thank you. And I thank you for doing all the work that you've done and the areas that you've gone to bring out the real truth about what goes on in some of those neighborhoods that other people aren't willing to go to. You were willing to go in those neighborhoods, and I thank you.
And I'm still willing to go in, but it's a process now. All right, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you guys for joining us on Reasons Why Aliens Will Never Invade Earth. This will also be posted on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts for your listening pleasures. Remember, this podcast, Millennial Boom, and Cult Misbehaving segments are funded by donations and viewer subscriptions. So you can follow our Linktree link if you want to help keep this going. And that is at www.linktree.com/Mr. Badley TV. Again, that's www.linktree.com/Mr. Badley TV. There are a bunch of links there. You can either subscribe, you can donate, you can do whatever you can to keep this moving. But we do thank you for joining us. And again, we want to thank the Sheriff from Alameda County, Gregory Ahern, for joining us. And we appreciate it. And subscribe to the Twitch account. And thank you very much for joining us. And have a good day.